Welcome back to TV Judge Bulldogs. Coming up in this November, Salt Lake City is going to have a mayoral election. To further your understanding on who's on the ballot, we've set up interviews with candidates and are recording multimedia stories so you can know who and what you're voting for. I'm your host, Ted Hinkstrom, and today we're going to interview the current mayor and incumbent candidate, Erin Mendenhall. Mayor Mendenhall, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for doing this. It's fun.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, for our first question, I just want to ask you, in your first term, you were rather successful in your public policy and social welfare initiatives, specifically with the creation of Free Fair February and the formation of the Hive Pass. How are you planning to build and add to these initiatives?
Yeah, thanks. I came into local politics work because I was really upset about the air pollution here, and I didn't think enough was being done. So I started as an activist, became an advocate, and after several years in working at the legislature as a lobbyist, I decided to run for office. And so these public policies that affect our everyday quality of life are what the city's work is all about. Public transit's one of those big things. It's a big cost for families. It can be something that makes it harder for you to access jobs after school or internships or apprenticeships or even stay after and get tutoring. And especially with our west-east divide in this city, where a lot of our west side students go to east side high schools, we knew we wanted to make it easier and cheaper for people to use public transit. Free Fair February was an idea I had to celebrate the 20-year anniversary of the Olympics. And I think one of the best things we got out of the Olympics in 2002 was tracks. So I worked with UTA, said, could Salt Lake City just do a Free Fair February to celebrate? And they loved the idea so much, and so many other stakeholders bought on, that we did the entire system. And it was the longest experiment in free transit in the state's history. And a lot of people use the system, many more than I think we even expected. So that's a great way for us to start leveraging the state of Utah, who invests in the UTA system with us, to help envision a free future for us. But the biggest thing we've done is 25,000 bus passes for all of Salt Lake City school districts, public school students, one of their parents, and all of their teachers, trying to make transit riders out of the young people in our city today and make it more affordable for families to get around. We have big ideas on transit. We're building more trails that punch through the west to east divide, developing our foothill trails, more parks in the city. Voters just passed a bond that we proposed last year. We're going to build the first new regional park in Salt Lake City in over 60 years in Glendale. It's the very first one on the west side, and we just broke ground today.
Incredible. That's incredible. My next question is, as young adults, my peers and I are concerned about the ongoing climate crisis affecting our Earth. Reservoirs run dry as more and more summer days top 100 degrees, wildfires blanket our valley in smoke, and the drying of the Great Salt Lake exposes toxic chemicals from the lake bed to the air. Your start in politics was your commitment to improving air quality on the city council, and as mayor, you've planted over 1,000 trees on the west side each year of your term. Could you describe one thing you would do if reelected to continue to address climate change in our local community?
Yes, 100% clean energy is coming into Salt Lake City by 2030. Rocky Mountain Power was reluctant about getting it to us that quickly. They said we can't do it till 2050. But climate crisis is the single biggest threat on all of humanity. It is our global existential crisis. The Great Salt Lake is a symptom of that, and it's our local example of it. It's, in a way, the rallying cry for the state legislature, supermajority Republican, to get more environmental. And the threat of 5 to 7 years before we have a full ecological collapse at the lake is real and imminent. So I think in the next 4 years, we're going to keep doing everything that we can to not only conserve water here in Salt Lake City, but to influence the legislature and the rural decision makers, where the majority of the water that could go to the lake is being used for agriculture or for mining. And we need to be able to influence those policies so that Utah farmers can still make a living, but that they are likely to have to pass that water down to the lake instead of growing the crops that they historically have.
Thank you. My next question is, some of my peers have expressed a concern towards systemic racism that exists in the police department. How will you continue to work towards more equity in our community?
When George Floyd was murdered, Salt Lake City, which has been the First Amendment kind of front yard of the state of Utah forever, we became the grounds for this massive social conversation and for people to come out. And we had 300 protest events over about a 7-month period of time. I'm glad that Salt Lake City is where we come to have our voices heard. But we got to work really quickly in City Hall to figure out what we need to do, which is not fixing things. It's that the system was built this way. The system was built inequitably, and equality and equity are not the same thing. So it's not about fixing, it's about building anew, and we built a Commission on Racial Equity in Policing. We put them in place in August of 2020, and they are not city employees. They're community members with diverse experiences, amazing backgrounds, and perspectives that needed to be influenced around policing budget, policy, and culture. We funded them. We put all the staff that they may need to ask these hard questions and ask them to look around the country, even around the world, at good ideas that we need to incorporate as reforms. We put those reforms, they brought me reforms. We took them to the city council for funding and for passage as ordinance in the city, and they have been reshaping our police department. Some of the things that have come out of it, we have civilians in our police department now, which we never had before. We send police out to all sorts of calls, and many of them, some of them, are not criminal and don't need a police officer necessarily to respond, and really in many cases could be better handled by someone who has different training than a police officer. I'll give you one example. Up at the University of Utah, we have a football games coming out where have officers who are called away from answering 911 calls to direct traffic instead, so tracks can get through and the intersection doesn't get clogged. That's kind of ridiculous. We should have civilians out there directing traffic so officers can answer to criminal activities that are happening. Or someone having a mental health crisis. We've doubled our social workers in our police department so that if someone's in mental health crisis, that's not a criminal activity. We can send a crisis worker, a social worker out there in a co-responder model with an officer for their own security, and they respond to help with a mental health crisis. These are the kind of changes the Commission on Racial Equity in Policing has helped us to make, and they are permanent now in our city government function. We're going to keep asking them to consistently unpack what could we do better, and that's not something Salt Lake City's ever seen before.
Okay, thank you. Currently, our neighborhoods are experiencing an issue of homelessness. You've commented in the past on how the city isn't well equipped to deal with homelessness and have supported initiatives in your term to slow the creation of new homeless shelters, at least until other parts of the state step up their efforts. What is one step you're working on currently or will be in the future to eliminate homelessness in SLC?
Yeah, we've seen homelessness escalate across the nation, especially since the pandemic began. And in the state of Utah, that's been concentrated mostly in Salt Lake City. But in my 10 years in City Hall, as a council person and now as mayor, I have had mayors and council people from other cities around the state of Utah look me in the eye time and again and say, if we have somebody in our community that's experiencing homelessness, we put them in the back of a cop car and drop them off in Salt Lake. And I think they mean it like we don't know what else to do. But cities around this state have made decisions after decision to not even allow for services to happen through their zoning in many cases, not invest in deeply affordable housing. And so when life happens and people lose their housing for a myriad of real reasons, there are no choices in most of our communities. That's why this cannot be solved by a single city, and it also doesn't all come from a single city. And so we've been working over the last 3.5 years to try to bring the state and the county, who have different resources and more money than we do as a city, to help us solve this problem. One of the things we're going to keep doing that we're just about to open the doors on in the next month are a shelter community of pods. They're little rooms. We've never done this in the state of Utah. And I said, since I started as mayor, we need more shelter types. The homeless resource centers don't accommodate everyone. They're usually full. And for a lot of reasons, from anxiety to serious mental illness, some people on the streets can't say yes to a room with 50 other cots surrounding them. We need different types of shelter. So these pods are about 8 by 10 room. They're insulated, they're heated and cooled. They have a door that locks, there's a bed and space for people's things. There'll be 24/7 management on site, service workers to help connect people with whatever they need, get food onto the site. And that is a shelter that we're doing in partnership with the state, and it will open this November.
Okay, thank you. And then to add to that last question, you talked about housing for a second. Housing is at the moment very expensive in the city and throughout the state as well. How are you working to create more affordable housing throughout the city?
Yeah, Salt Lake City, really the state of Utah, especially along the Wasatch Front, has been in a housing crisis for over a decade. We've been not producing as much housing as our population growth. And our wages in the state of Utah, where minimum wage is restricted by the state legislature, they have not been keeping pace with the cost of housing. So we've seen this crisis, it's been building for a very long time. When I became the mayor, because I'd seen this crisis building, I knew we were going to go big on housing. And we've invested more in the creation of affordable housing units than every mayoral administration combined. $55 million we've already invested out the door, and we just approved another $20 million. The 55 has helped to create 4,000 new units of affordable housing, and that's across a spectrum. The reason for that is that there's housing needs all over, from your teachers' salaries to firefighters to the person working right here in this building repairing the light fixtures, to people who have lost their housing and have no income at this point. So the city's been investing across that spectrum, but we prioritize our investment for the deeply affordable. And that is where we've helped to create almost 600 new units. So even if you make nothing, you can have permanent supportive housing, supportive being all those resources you need that are on site for you as much as possible. That's the kind of investment we're going to keep doing here in Salt Lake City. And the best part is we're not doing it alone anymore. The state of Utah has ramped up their investment even bigger than ours, and they used to invest even less than us most years in affordable housing. So we're partnering on creating more projects together and investing in the growth that's already happening here, which is a major cost savings to us as taxpayers.
Thank you, yeah. And then my final question. In the upcoming election, many people my age, including myself, will be first-time voters. Why should we vote for you?
First of all, I'm so glad you're going to vote. It's, I think, harder and harder to compel people to vote. And that is just, it's exciting to me that you're planning on it. Are you telling me right now you're going to vote, Ted?
I'm planning, yeah.
Okay. You don't need to tell me how you're going to vote. It's just important that you will. And I want people to know also, if you're not yet 18, you can go to vote.utah.gov and register early to vote. And that way, when you turn 18, even if it's close to election day, you'll be able to cast your ballot. So please do vote. I think this race really comes down to the tone of leadership. My opponent, when he was the mayor, and frankly ever since then, has been about burning bridges. He likes to point fingers, make accusations, and lose the relationships that we should have here, investing with us and helping us solve what are capital city challenges, statewide challenges, not working on an island alone. And that's been a big part of my job in the last 3.5 years, is to rebuild these burned bridges and bring those partnerships back together. There's big things happening in Salt Lake. We're on the cusp of, we hope, another Winter Olympic Games being awarded to us. Major League Baseball, National Hockey League are looking at coming here. We've had the strongest downtown recovery in the nation, 139% more people coming downtown than we had in 2019. Good things are happening, but it's not something we can take for granted. That progress is about partnership, it's about patience, setting aside partisan politics in the state of Utah, where we're a really blue dot in a really red state. You got to be able to get along with people. I love this work, I love this community, and I'm so excited I still have the energy and that I'm enthusiastic about being the mayor, and I hope to do it for 4 more years.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's all the time that we have for today. Yeah, thank you so much for answering our questions, Mayor Mendenhall. Thank you for tuning in, Bulldogs. Voting day is November 21st, and see you at the polls. Thank you.